Awesome.
Hey, so good to finally speak to you. And I am so excited to be talking about this because today, Stefan and I are going to be talking about the future of work and managing diverse workforces, right? So,
Mhm.
Stefan, why don't you give us a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Stefan Kollenberg. I'm the CMO here at Crescendo, and we're a diversity training tool inside of Slack.
Excellent. Wow, that was so quick. You've got your like 10-second pitch there.
It's been
That's what we
nonstop. Yeah,
do.
no, going through the program here has been it's been exciting. We've been forced to get that pitch down to like a snap.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm Bhumi. I'm the founder and CEO at InteriMarket, and we are an end-to-end total contingent solution. I got it too.
I love it. I love it.
So what I really wanted to do is because we have a lot of viewers who are both from HR, recruitment, but also
Mhm.
users generally, who are following technology and how the changes are going on in terms of the future of work. And I usually speak with people really to focus on a key area or key topics that, they're either challenged about or they simply cannot move forward in terms of they all know that the change is needed, but they simply
Mhm.
cannot do. So today, the topic that we are going to be discussing, Stefan, between you and I, is the three key things that we need to discuss for the future of workforce because it's all about diverse workforces, right?
Mhm.
So why don't you tell me what are the three key things?
Yeah, so really the what I want to break down today is kind of looking at globalization, how that's affecting the modern day workforce.
Yeah.
So step one, really doing that. And then the next part was kind of the implications this has on managers and senior leaders. And
Mm.
then lastly, how can your company, like what can you do to overcome these challenges that are going to exist for many, many years? So those are
Yeah.
kind of the things we want to break into today.
Absolutely, and I love that. So, should we just kickstart in that case, right? And so, when we're talking about globalization, you're absolutely spot on. With everything that's going on, it is very difficult for businesses, especially hiring teams and centralized or decentralized, to actually keep track of their workforce.
Hmm.
So, what
Yeah.
are the points that you wanted to raise here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk a bit specifically from the lens of Toronto here over in Canada. And so something that's kind of unique to our market in terms of like our talent market is that it's dry. Like it is so hard, as especially technical talent is extremely hard to hire technical talent here. And it's an extremely diverse city. And so you've got people coming in from all over the world. There's now
Right.
tons of firms popping up, like for example, like Van Hack,
Mm.
which is purely focused on bringing in external talent from around the globe to
Yeah.
help fill that gap in the Toronto tech market. So this is a huge issue
Yeah.
in Toronto, but also some of the kind of the implications of this is that you're now seeing a lot more remote workers. So folks that are like, there's a lot more power on the side of the potential employee because they know the market is hot. So there's like them being able to stay remote, higher salaries,
Mm.
like more flexible work, all these types of things are coming in, and they're things that employers now need to do and be mindful of. And I guess the next kind of slice of that is that with such a diverse workforce, there's so many different experiences and cultural norms now coming all into one kind of big like melting pot. And that brings up different challenges, whether it's communication, differences in the workplace style, like all these types of things really create small challenges for businesses, but they're not insurmountable. And I guess we'll get into some of the solutions a bit later on.
Absolutely. I think from my perspective, I agree to everything you said, but also I'd like to add is that the whole forever employee agenda mentality needs to shift and it has to become a total people agenda.
Mhm.
So whether it's HR teams or resourcing teams or businesses themselves, traditionally we've never had a home, as an example, for contingent workers. So, depending on the business or the sector, we would be either sitting in procurement or somewhere else. And so I think that in addition to what you've said, that there needs to be now a total people agenda, not
Mhm.
just an employee agenda, is what you're hinting at as well, isn't it? That they need to look at everybody because augmenting this workforce is what is going to be key in understanding the skills and the gaps that sort of start to appear within the workforce.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's another thing. Like contractors are going to be a huge part of this as well. Like
Mm.
looking at, I know many of my friends that have got other startups. Like outsourcing like half their dev team.
Yeah.
Like there's folks all over the world that they're working with, because it's like, for example, there's one company, they were over in San Francisco. It's like they could not afford to hire 4 machine learning folks. Like that's like, especially in the San Francisco market, like that would blow through their entire like source of capital. So like they needed to look overseas to find good talent at an affordable rate. And so they're working with a team of contractors over in the Ukraine.
Absolutely. And so that's very typical, not only, so first we used to see that happen only with enterprises, you know, like large businesses having contingent workforce. But now, like you say, we all need variety of talent. So it's no longer an employee agenda, right? It's more of a total people agenda for businesses. I want to move on to the second point with that, having said that what implications does this have on managers and senior leaders?
Yeah.
Because if you can imagine, it's confusing. There is so much technology. There are so many teams. There is so much going on. So what are your sort of key points there to help managers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest challenges going to be facing the future of specifically kind of like the middle manager is how to manage remote teams. So this is so hard because normally, like traditionally, everyone's in the same office. You do your stand up, like you got this kind of office mentality where there's all the even inside jokes, like the culture just grows because you're all hanging out. Like you see each other walking in the halls, that type of stuff. But now with remote work, you're seeing like you're there for meetings and then you kind of go do your own work and then you're back for meetings. And so then you're always meeting in this very professional context, and there's a lack of that social context, which creates like the inclusive space and helps people kind of relate to each other. And like, yeah, like
Wow.
that's a big challenge. And so something, a couple tips that I've gathered from different HR folks and what they're doing is finding ways to create those like inside jokes or water cool, like casual conversation outside of these meetings. So there's a one like clear cut example was creating a Slack channel around like, it was like funny Tuesdays or something like that. And she would switch up the theme every week. Like one week it would be like your worst childhood haircut, or like another week would be like the worst date you went on, or something like fun and just like casual conversation, stuff like this, where you start to build up these inside jokes and you build that culture while still being remote. So that's kind of one look at there for managing remote teams. And another part that I'd touch on here is relating specifically to diversity and having diverse workforces. You want to focus your hiring process not around culture fit, which it traditionally has been a big piece, has been around, oh, let's get the right fit for our culture, but rather culture add. So adding to your culture, adding different perspectives, unique points of view that are going to help you create better solutions. You're going to get more innovative problem solving. And this filters down to your marketing, sales, product, everything throughout your business. And so it's a huge important piece with this growingly diverse workforce is like, okay, let's focus on adding things to our culture. And then I guess the last thing that I want to touch on there is creating spaces that are inclusive for people of all backgrounds and people that feel, so they can feel like they belong in that workplace. And so this is not, so I want to be clear, this is not like tokenizing someone. So like having like, oh, this is like the one person of color in our office and let's like celebrate them, make sure that like that's like that,
I hate
it
when
just
that
feels
happens.
inauthentic. Yeah, it's just not real. And so it's like, let's like create positive conversations in the workplace so that people feel safe to bring up their opinions, their concerns. And as leaders, make sure that you're asking for feedback. So I think this is one thing I'll touch on in the next part as well, but it's like really important for senior leaders to be expressively asking for feedback, because otherwise that power dynamic will not be like, there won't naturally come up this opportunity for like employees further down in the hierarchy to give feedback, just because that they're worried. Like you don't want to say something wrong to your like boss's boss for fear of getting punished. So yeah, that's a couple of the points that I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is fantastic, because I do not disagree with any of those points, you know, especially the inclusion bit. For me, one of the key points that I would like to tell managers to do is to basically add trust and have empathy in their communication, especially when the teams are remote or they're not non-permanent staff, there are graduates. As part of this total people agenda, I feel that businesses, for some reason, or business managers or hiring managers or teams become so focused on goals that they actually forget to add empathy to goals, which actually makes people a lot more productive. And there is a key element that is missing with remote workers is trust aspect.
Yeah.
I think many businesses, when you touch on the culture point, I think many businesses today are still stuck in the, no, we don't want remote working as much, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, is because they don't trust their employees and their colleagues. And if you don't trust people, why hire them? Is my question, right? So for me, the implications of having a global open source or this augmented workforce is the ability to be able to trust them and be empathetic in your conversations and communication. So that sort of creates this whole diversity and inclusive atmosphere that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I really, really like that point. And so obviously we're moving into the challenges point, because that is key. I think we've got the right kind of opinions, and I'm pretty sure that everybody that watches this is going to agree that, no, we agree with that, but it's about how do we implement that. So let's talk about a couple of challenges.
Yeah. So I guess I touched on a couple of them in my last question, but another to add on to like the remote team management is around like the kind of speaking time within remote meetings. So when you're on a video call, oftentimes people who are more outgoing and oftentimes very like men dominate conversations, and then there's less opportunity for other people in that to share their perspective and their view. And so what I've seen is actual like physical. It's kind of like a pyramid in the middle of your table, in the middle of like all the meeting rooms. I think Shopify did this really well, and it's got like kind of like a reminder, like, hey, have you been talking for like more than 5 minutes straight? Like sure. Sometimes there are going to be situations where someone is like leading a meeting, they're giving a presentation. Yeah, you're going to be talking for a while. But if it's meant to be a discussion, you should have a reminder in there to be like, hey, like this is a physical thing that's like in your face, so you don't forget to let other people spend time talking. Just because, especially like if it's like there's a bunch of introverts and a few extroverts, like those extroverts are just going to dominate the conversation if there's no interruption of their flow. So that's one thing. When it comes to, I guess, hiring process, so this is a specific piece of advice that I would look at is like especially with such a competitive market, the changing desire for like, oh, you need a bachelor's degree with this and 4 years of experience doing this. It's like, right, if you look at those, what they're doing is they're saying, here's like a number or a way for me to try and measure the expected skills that someone will have after going through a bachelor's degree and 4 years of this. But you're not actually looking at what are the specific skills that I need on this team. And so like when you're going through your hiring process, in order to make it more like actually measuring some of the stuff that you need for that role. So like the specific skills, like put those on there first, not the like, oh, I need you to have a degree in this and 4 years of experience doing it. Like those are, it's just not relevant. And so that's one piece of advice that I do. It kind of also helps increase the number of applications and folks that think that, okay, this is something that I can do. I've got the skills, like I can show the skills by like presenting this. Like if it's a technical interview, showing the actual code that you've written, which is required for that job. So those are just a couple things in the hiring process. And then lastly, I guess, really focusing on kind of like the creation of inclusive workplaces and creating a positive workplace culture is to facilitate open and honest conversations. Something I've heard is creating brave conversations. So this is a term I really like. And again, Shopify, they're doing a great job, so I'll bring them up again. But pretty much they've created a kind of a Slack channel where people who maybe are not very familiar with other people's cultures, backgrounds, or sexual orientation, these types of things, can ask difficult questions that they otherwise would not ask, just because they don't want to be like seen as getting something wrong. And so then their diversity inclusion team helps answer those questions in a space that is like constructive for them. So it's like, hey, like we get it. Like these are difficult subjects. You don't always understand them, and we'll help answer those so that you can at least you get that question asked and answered without kind of looking or have the fear of being wrong or saying something incorrect and getting kind of lashed out on, which is not productive whatsoever. And I guess just to kind of summarize all these are a couple of things. I've actually created a list of a ton more. I think probably counting a bit over 100 now, split up into these different categories of how you can create more inclusive workplaces, looking at your hiring process, that type of stuff. And we'll include the list in the kind of the talk notes afterwards.
I was going to say that you've got a shared resources link
Yeah.
as well that I'm going to add to this video so
Awesome.
everyone can check it out and access it.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, I think looking at companies and how can companies and businesses overcome this challenge is literally, I think they need to get the basics right. Right?
Hmm.
Like you say, everyone is still looking at the, I don't know, 100-year-old CV of how CVs were, you know, when they were after the world wars. We needed a piece of paper to tell someone's credentials. It's now morphed into something that's become such an academic exercise,
Mm.
which is not useful. I am a big fan of competencies because I know that competencies change. And when I used to do assessments and, you know, advise managers, I would always say that think about it, that you've got 10 different pieces of information that you're then going to use to, you know, make a final decision, not just
Mhm.
based on experience, based on competencies, based on psychometrics, based on everything. And
Mhm.
then the final bit is the attitude, right? For me, it's most important to have the right attitude for the jobs,
Mhm.
especially as more and more people are going for flexible careers and portfolio careers, remote working. I think if the businesses, especially if the hiring teams and you know, teams working together do not get those basics right of getting trust and having empathy and just being able to communicate clearly, like
Mhm.
you've mentioned, you know, in an open and honest way, is what you've said as well. It is, it's going to continue down that spiral of negative feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
So there is something that I follow through, which is called a positive feedback loop, is that
Mhm.
if you tell someone something good, they will then feel good about it and reflect that onto other people. And that's how you start creating a positive feedback loop. But if I just come to you and say, despite how good or bad my day was, if I just come out to you and just be negative, I've created
Mhm.
a negative loop in your brain. So even if you're positive, there is something that's gone wrong and you might react in a way
Mhm.
that's not you to someone else. And I think we do so much of this in workplaces,
Mhm.
especially with, as I said, you know, teams that are not currently part of the core employee group. They're
Mhm.
not included. And I have to be honest, I've been working as a contingent worker and interim for 9.5 years, and it was only based on the teams and the managers that I worked with that would include me. But otherwise, majority of the time, contractors are not even part of
Yeah.
the conversation.
Mhm.
So I think
Yeah.
this has been a fantastic conversation, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
do want you to touch upon the shared resources that I'm going to
Mhm.
share very quickly. If you don't mind just concluding, Stefan, and giving us
Yeah.
a, you know, a quick, what should people look out for, particularly in that? Because it's a huge document. I've looked
Mhm.
through it. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is huge. And so what I've done is I got a table of contents at the top. So we've got things in there like how to get senior leadership buy-in for your diversity inclusion program.
Right.
Like there's like so much research that has been done out there. You don't need to go and do that research again.
No.
So I put in a couple links there that'll help you kind of build that like business case if you need to convince senior leadership. And then I guess later on, there's like a few mentions of like different tools you can use to try and de-bias your hiring process, different strategies that other HR managers have used to do just that. And so I've got kind of a big growing list of all these different things. Like I can't even remember all the different topics. There's tons in there, but
Oh,
also
that's
like
fantastic.
book recommendations, podcast recommendations, like all this type of stuff. And then at the bottom, we've got a list of contributors. So these are just, I haven't created all these resources. These are sourced from the community. And so I've highlighted
Excellent.
some great people. Like, so even if you just want to go kind of like diversify your feed and
Yeah.
follow some amazing people on LinkedIn, go check that out. Highly recommended. I've linked it to all the folks who contributed at the bottom. And actually, there's one that I really want to shout out specifically, the parenting playbook. So here in Toronto, some amazing women put together this guideline of like how to like create a parental leave policy, how workplaces can manage that more like better.
Yeah.
I don't have the right words right now, but yeah, no, like Anna and Nora and Amanda put together some amazing work there. So would highly recommend for any companies looking for kind of parental leave policy.
Yeah.
They put together an amazing playbook on that.
That's fantastic. I'm definitely going to check it out. And if you're okay with it, I'm going to share it on InteriMarket as well,
Absolutely.
providing a link to you because we do have a few things, but this would be fantastic for users as well. Well, thank you so much, Stefan. I think we've got a great chat here that I'm
Yeah.
so excited to start start letting people have a look at and come
Yeah.
back to us with any follow-on questions, right?
Yes, absolutely. This was amazing.
Wonderful. Well, lovely to talk to you.
Yes. And have a great day yourself.
You too.